Right friends, welcome back to News Analysis. This week we are going to deliberate about fiscal consolidation. What is the meaning of fiscal consolidation? And before going into it, I would like to take you the topic with one example of Ramesh. Let us look into this slide. That is, Ramesh is earning 50,000 salary per month. The salary of Ramesh is 50,000 per month, and he has got 3 options to borrow. He was given 3 options to borrow. First option is he can borrow rupees 10 lakh over a period of 15 years. That means the repayment period is 15 years. And EMI, that is equated monthly installment, that means monthly repayment of both the principal and interest put together will come to rupees 10,000 a month. If he borrows rupees 10 lakh, he has to pay rupees 10,000 a month. If he borrows 50 lakh, he has to pay back rupees 50,000 a month. And if he borrows 1 crore, then he has to pay back rupees 1 lakh per month. 3 options were given to Ramesh, who is earning rupees 50,000 a month, and Ramesh will choose option number 1, that is, he will borrow rupees 10 lakh. What is the reason? The reason is, if he borrows 10 lakh, the EMI will be rupees 10,000 a month, which he will be comfortably paying back. And if he borrows rupees 50 lakh, EMI will be rupees 50,000, his salary is rupees 50,000, and nothing will be with him for day-to-day expenditure. And borrowing rupees 1 crore is out of question. So 50 lakhs also he cannot borrow, he can borrow only up to rupees 10 lakh. Here the 3 options are given. Out of 3 options, he can comfortably borrow rupees 10 lakhs. So Ramesh decided to borrow 10 lakh. He took this decision because of the reason he should have repayment capability also. Right? Next, if you look into the next one, that is, he borrowed rupees 10 lakh. Then there are 2 options for him. First option is he can travel across the world with the family and spend these 10 lakh rupees. One option is he can travel in aeroplanes across the world with his family and he can spend this rupees 10 lakh. Second option is he can purchase a house. Definitely he will vote for the second option, for purchasing a house. So in Ramesh's case, we have clearly seen 2 things. One is there is a limit of borrowing. Second case is how to spend that money. There is a limit on borrowing, and second important aspect is how to spend that money. He will definitely vote for spending that money by purchasing a house. Right? Similarly, if you look at the Government of India has to follow similar things. As we have seen in case of Ramesh, what Government of India has to do? Government of India has to borrow money up to only certain limit. They cannot exceed. And second important point is, Government of India has to spend that money for creation of assets, which is popularly known as capital expenditure. As we have seen in case of Ramesh, Ramesh can borrow money up to certain limit. Not only up to certain limit, as we have seen, the borrowed money is to be used for creation of assets. These 2 things we have seen in case of Ramesh. Similarly, in case of Government of India also, government can borrow money up to certain limit. Then second important point is, government has to use that money for creation of assets, that is capital expenditure. And having learned this, let us look into this. If you look at budget 2016-17, if you look at the budget figures of 2016-17, the total expenditure is somewhere around 19,78,000 crores. The total expenditure is 19,78,000 crores, whereas total revenue is 14,44,000 crores, and there is a fiscal deficit of 5,33,000 crores. This fiscal deficit of rupees 5,33,000 crores, government has to meet this by market borrowing. So every year government will have market borrowing program That means government has to borrow from market, and so as to bridge the fiscal deficit, government will borrow from the market. So as we have already seen, government can borrow money up to certain limit. Second important point is it has to use it for creation of assets. So these two things we have already seen, and here the fiscal deficit is normally expressed as percentage of GDP. All of you are well aware GDP is gross domestic product, and here the fiscal deficit is calculated based on percentage of GDP, right? And there is one act brought by the government in the year 2003, popularly known as the Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act of 2003. And as per this act, fiscal deficit should be 3% of GDP. Ultimate aim of the government is to ensure fiscal deficit at 3% of GDP. Somehow government could not ensure this 3% of GDP, and last year government devised the roadmap. As per that roadmap, in 2016-17, fiscal deficit will be 3.5%. And by 2017-18, government will realize that figure of 3% as per FRBM Act of 2003. So government initially committed a roadmap of ensuring 3% of GDP as the fiscal deficit previously, but now government wants to review the provisions of FRBM Act 2003. That means government does not want to limit fiscal deficit, it wants to spend more by borrowing more money, right? What is the need for limiting fiscal deficit? The need for limiting fiscal deficit is, if the fiscal deficit exceeds a certain limit, it will give rise to public debt to GDP ratio. Government is borrowing every year, and this accumulation of fiscal deficit over the years is called public debt. This accumulation of fiscal deficit, last year government borrowed around 6 lakh crores, government is going to borrow money this year also, government will borrow money next year also. This entire accumulation of fiscal deficits over the period of time is called public debt. So if government borrow more money, what will happen? Raise in public debt to GDP ratio will be there. Second important point is, it will give rise to inflationary tendencies, which is not conducive for a developing country like India. So if government borrows more money, it will give rise to inflationary tendencies. This is very important. And third and most important point is, most of our revenues will go for interest payments. Most of our revenues will go for interest payments. And if you look at the budget figures, how the rupee comes, how the rupee goes. The income for the government comes 21% from borrowing. Please look into this. Government, this 21% of the income comes from borrowing, and at the same time, if you look at the expenditure of the government, 19% go for interest payments. If the fiscal deficit increases beyond certain limit, then what will happen? Most of the money will go for interest payments and very less will be left for other types of expenditure. So that's why government wants to limit fiscal deficit. So limiting the fiscal deficit is very important because of these three given reasons, right? And second important point is, use it for creation of assets, which is known as capital expenditure. Use it for creation of assets, construct expressways, construct factories, develop irrigation facilities, then develop ports and other infrastructure. Then what will happen? It will lead to creation of jobs, GDP will grow. So borrowing money is one aspect and spending borrowed money is another aspect. So governments has to spend more money for capital expenditure. That is very, very important. So fiscal deficit assumes a significance because of two reasons. If fiscal deficit goes beyond certain limit, then it will give rise to inflationary tendencies and other reasons as we have already listed. Second is, spend that money for creating assets which will ultimately lead to GDP growth, creation of employment, country will progress, right? So, this is what is known as capital expenditure, right friends? So, as far as fiscal deficit is concerned, these two are very important. Limit the amount of borrowing and spend it for creation of assets, as we have already discussed, not only from Government of India's perspective, but also from the perspective of a classic case of Ramesh. Now, Budget 2016-17 has voted for fiscal consolidation. It has not gone for fiscal expansion. Right friends, what is the difference between fiscal consolidation and fiscal expansion? Government felt that there is a need for fiscal expansion, but government voted for fiscal consolidation because some time back government decided to bring the fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP by 2017-18. Government do not want to lose the confidence of foreign investors, and so as to ensure consistency in policies, government voted for fiscal consolidation. So, government retained 3.5% of GDP as the fiscal deficit which was previously devised, and several experts advised to go in for fiscal expansion. What is meant by fiscal expansion? This year we kept this as 3.5%. Why can't we go up to 4%? Why can't we go up to 4.5%? Because we can borrow more money. That money can be used for creating assets, because private investment is not coming up recent times. So, as private investment is not taking off, only option left for the government is to spend more. That's why borrow more money and spend more money on creation of capital assets. That is the theory going in the rounds for the past few months, which is known as fiscal expansion. What government decided is fiscal consolidation. But what several proponents of economic theory recently stated is fiscal expansion. Borrow more money and create more assets so that the country will grow fast. It will lead to more job opportunities. But the reasons why government has not gone in for fiscal expansion is so as to create confidence among the foreign investors, and at the same time so as to prevent capital flight. So, with that in intention, government voted for fiscal consolidation, and at the same time government stated that in future this FRPM Act 2003 will be modified so as to give more space for fiscal deficit, because as per FRBM Act, government has to bring the deficit to 3% of GDP, and so as to go for more fiscal expansion in future, government decided to take the route of modifying the FRBM Act of 2003. So, government voted for fiscal consolidation. That means it is not going to borrow more money, and at the same time private investment is also not coming up on the expected lines. So, what are the alternatives left? So, from the fiscal front, government has done the minimum which is possible under the present framework of fiscal consolidation, and now the matter lies with RBI for growth. Fiscal policy as well as monetary policy, both are important, and government has gone for fiscal consolidation. That means they are not going to borrow more money than which was devised as per the roadmap previously. By limiting 3.5% as the fiscal deficit, government has not gone for the option of borrowing more money. So, now the onus lies on Reserve Bank of India to propel growth. So, now what Reserve Bank will do in future, we have to wait and see. So, in the next week news analysis, we are going to deliberate on the monetary expansion, whether Reserve Bank of India will go for it or not. Right, with this let us conclude the news analysis. Please do join for other modules. Have a nice day, and please do join for 10th week news analysis, we are going to deliberate on monetary expansion. Right friends, have a nice day. Thank you.